recording. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Aouria lore lesson. Purpose of this is we've done a lot of world building in the last 8 years of Aouria. Lots of people have added in their own 2 cents. I've done my best to kind of lay a framework and then build upon that framework as everyone's added stuff over the last little bit, which has led to a bit of a situation where no one really knows the full picture because not really anywhere because it's just been added. So this is hopefully designed to get everybody on the same page to cover all this stuff. Some of this you will probably be old news to many of you. For some of you, this will be completely new news. But we're going to go through everything just from start to finish. We've spent about I spent about 3-4 hours compiling all the data and all the notes. Dewey spent double that amount of time making my notes actually look pretty and readable. So, that's great. So let's get started. Meg, you want to get the first slide going?
Yep.
So we're going to be going. This lore lesson was initially designed to be in 3 parts. Once we started putting everything together, we realized 3 parts was kind of too ambitious, and it was going to be information overload. So we're only doing parts 1 and 2. If there is still interest after this session, if it works well, we'll do another part which will cover the Succession War historic timeline. But today we're going to be focusing exclusively on the Fae. This is in prep for Chapter 11. I think everyone here knows that Chapter 11 will involve the Fae courts at this point, and we're going to kind of need to have some basic information, as all your characters will have this information available to them. We're going to be talking about the Fae species and the principles of magic, just kind of taking that from start to finish, because we just get lots of questions about this, and I think it's a good chance to just go over all of it and get everybody on the same page. And then the second half is going to be a more specific breakdown of how the Fae Kingdom works, what their politics are like, what their history is like, and who are the key members that exist in the royal family as of right now. So, Meg, next slide.
Question.
No.
Oh, so about questions, we will have 2 question breaks going through. As you guys are familiar, there is in the voice call, there's a little side chat where you can kind of plug in information. Write your questions as you have them in the side chat, and we will address them during the question breaks. So if you have a question right now, put that in the little side chat, and I will make sure to check it, okay? Perfect. Fantastic. Meg, why don't you read our opening quote for us?
So the reason why we chose this quote was mainly because this pretty much entails everything that we're going to be talking about today. The only race in Aouria that create and wield magic at will are those with Fae blood running through their veins.
So, basic start is the Fae species. We'll start where it all began. This is a magic race. They are the wild beings of Aouria and make up 20% of the total population. That 20% is a rough number. It's obviously not a completely clean 20, but there isn't really anyone who's doing a legitimate census work in our universe. The Fae like to be unpredictable and often have little love for formal rules and laws and are complicated technologies. Like their unpredictability, Fae have many subraces across the lands, varying from elves, pixies, mermaids, demons, etc. The subraces typically group together to form courts that create the Fae governing bodies and each rule each island. However, there are many types of Fae, and there are even islands that accept all subraces and create a communion sort of atmosphere with no leadership figures. Each Fae is born with a magic all their own, and this is so far held true for everyone. For everyone born under the umbrella of the born under. Wow, we did a typo there. Everyone born under the umbrella of the Fae, even half breeds. However, for all their power, they have the shortest lifespan in all of Aria. The average Fae lives to 40 to 50 years old, meaning once they reach the full maturity around age 15, the rapid aging is due to their magic power. Like a large flame that burns itself out, if a Fae uses a great deal of magic without properly training for it, these acts can reduce their. Did you just fix that? No, okay. Yes, you did.
No.
Okay, without properly training for it, these acts can reduce the lifespan even more. So, talking about the age thing, because I always feel this is like one of the number one questions that we get. So, the idea is between the ages of 1 to 15, Fae age quicker than any other race. So, they kind of just go through their maturity, their puberty, all that process a lot quicker. So, like a 15-year-old Fae is like a 20-year-old human. I would say that's probably the rough, or a 21-year-old human. I would say that's the rough comparison. Once they hit their maturity rate, they kind of almost hold that frame. So from ages like 16 to 45, they're genuinely, they kind of look the same the entire time. They might like, they'll have some slight age features going on. Like once they in those 40s, you'll start seeing some wrinkles, some like silver hair, that kind of stuff. But it isn't until the last 5 years of their natural lifespan. So that's if their natural lifespan is 50, that's 45 to 50. If their natural lifespan is 47, then it's 42 to 47. It's at the last 5 years, that's where you'll kind of see a rapid age decrease. This is how we kind of justify how Fae can be in their 30s or late 40s and still be relevant, but also, like, despite the fact they're getting close to their deathbeds, it's because they just age very, very rapidly. The exception to this rule is if they use a huge amount of mana very, very quickly. So, should they use unbridled magic and they kind of like burn themselves out, they can actually speed up their aging, and it's essentially the equivalency of borrowing their life force to use extra spells in a pinch. Not something we recommend. We haven't seen it explored in the story yet, but it is definitely a factor that's been there since day one. Next slide. So this is our subspecies breakdowns. So Fey and Bestials are a little more unique because they have subspecies and subraces. While all the Fey are under the Fey umbrella, there are hundreds of subspecies that can manifest. Each subrace might have unique abilities unrelated to their magic, such as flight, able to breathe underwater, tails, heat resistance, etc. These physical abilities are not to be confused with their magical abilities. So the idea is, if we'll use Kaleo for example, Galeo's magic is creation. Even though he has wings and he can fly, that is not his magic. Millie's runners is another good example. She has like leaf tendrils. That's not her magic. Her magic is poison. These physical abilities don't necessarily have to overlap with magic. Below, we have a fun little list. This is every single subrace that has appeared in the story thus far. So if you're ever curious what subraces have been done, here they are. We have everything from centaurs, dark elves, Jinns, the Draconis Fae that we just added this chapter, all the way to things like the Kappa from chapter 6. They're all here. We did notice that I did do a small change just because we had a lot of elves, and then kind of halfway through we started classifying elves with different terms. So we have dark elves, we have frost elves, which would be the court of frost from Leto's group. We have the moon elves, which would be the court of altitude, which is Audrey. Then we have the sun elf, which technically isn't a canon name. I just give them that for the sake of today's presentation. But that would be Relton and Surai from the court of the sun. I will follow up with Brandon. That might change if he has a preferred name otherwise. So yeah, essentially this is just the kind of idea that like Elfays kind of have little sub things going on with them because it's kind of how it naturally developed as the story was told. This was never planned. It was just once we kind of started playing with it and we had more and more elves, then elves started getting classified. This kind of feels like the best way to make everything kind of feel uniform while respecting all the individuality we've seen in the story thus far. Next slide. So Meg, I think you wanted to tackle this one.
Oh, did I? Okay.
I don't know. Did you?
So we have our three principles of magic that the Fae can use. The three principles are source of energy, regent, or catalyst. So when it comes down to the source of energy, mana is pretty much that. Um, this is the power source of all users of magic, and the amount of mana they have, the more magic they can use. Think of this like a magic pool or a jar inside the user. When you use magic, the pool empties. Um, so very similar, like we've seen it all throughout Aouria. This is basically the main source and what the Fae typically have. When it comes down to anything additional, this is where we'll run into like a regent instead. So an item that focuses the mana slash energy. So they need mana still in order to have a regent.
I'm gonna sorry, can I jump in for one quick second?
Yep.
So they
This
need all
is exactly.
they need all three.
Oh, well then you speak.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just confused there. So
You didn't give me this page number, by the way.
this is slide 3.
Nope, it's
Okay.
not.
Sorry. We'll technical difficulty. We'll sort that out later. Okay. So the three principles of magic is these are the three things you need to check off when creating magic. So it's the source of energy, which Meg did explain completely accurately. This is just your base magic and how much mana you have. If you don't have a base magic and you don't have mana, you can't use magic. The regent is the device you channel magic through. There's 4 types of regents: low grade, mid grade, high grade, solstice grade. And then the catalyst is essentially the casting of the spell. So in a case of like a Relton or a Millie, there's a spell attached to it, and they have to kind of like say something or like pronounce it to make their magic appear. Catalyst can be a mental image. It doesn't have to be verbal. It can also be something you draw, like a Vac or a Kaleo, because a Kaleo will trace outlines. So it's not necessarily like specific vocal spell casting, but the idea is you have to essentially like it's put thought to form essentially. So these are the 3 things every Fey Magic user has to do to be able to successfully cast a spell. If you take out any one of these, it won't work, or it'll work improperly. So for example, if you take out the Regent, and you use your magic, you actually do self harm to yourself, and you like kind of break your magic nerves. If you don't catalyst properly, your magic's going to, instead of being a nice focused fireball, it might just blow up in your face because you didn't catalyst it properly. So these are the 3 principles every good wizard needs to follow. All right.
All right.
This is a list of all the various types of magics we have seen in the story thus far. So every single one from a minor character to main characters is up here. We've got light magic, soul. I've broken them down into kind of core magic types and then sub variations. So light magic, we'll see like we have Relton, and then we have sub variants of plasma variant, hard light variant. We got soul magic with its variants. Creation has a ton of variants. Fire magic is insanely popular. I think it's the most popular magic we have in this entire story thus far. And you can kind of just get this idea of this breakdown. You're not expected to memorize this. I have this list on hand if you ever want to see it. You want to kind of go through the next 2, Meg? So it's gonna be like form manipulation magic. This is kind of our like this is physically changing the body. Water magic is not very popular, despite the fact we're pirates. We got some shadow magic, as we mentioned here. Gravity magic. We got a magnetism variant. Mind magic is one of my favorite fun ones because every single version of it's really unique in its variation. Um, and then we have more unique magics, which is the last panel. It starts with color magic, which is Vac. And then you'll kind of see that there's really just single users for a lot of these more specialty magics like time, anti-magic, teleportation, environmental, dimension magic. These are all very, very unique magic types that don't really kind of exist in their own little core group. This is not like a full list. We have lots of abilities to still add stuff down the road. But yeah, this is everything that's been covered thus far. Regents, there are 3 type of regents. Low grade and middle grade are the first 2 ones we'll talk about. They're pretty easy to understand. Low grade regents are kind of 1 to 2 use items. So these are things that are cheap. They they break down quite easily, and they're not really meant to be used multiple times. Anything can really be a low grade regent. A piece of cloth can be a low grade regent. We talked about the house example, joking around in the chat a few weeks ago. That if it wasn't like designed to be a specifically entranced with magic, that would be a low grade regent. You could use it once or twice, but because it's not designed to essentially coordinate with the magic user itself, it's going to break down quite quickly. There are times though when this is actually kind of beneficial depending on what you're using your magic. The 2 probably examples of I would say efficient low grade regents are Leto's puppet birds, because they're kind of one-off devices. He sends them into battle. He uses them for that period of time. If they break during the concept, it's whatever. He'll build a new one. Um, and Zaus's anti-magic bracelets from chapter 6, because Zaus's magic was anti-magic. He actually would break any region he used no matter what, even if it was high grade. So he used exclusively low grade regions because he could only use it once before breaking it. It was kind of like the catch-22 of his magical ability. Middle grade regions are a little bit different. Mid grade regions are essentially the devices or items that are designed to channel a specific magic type. So we talked about that when using that house example again. This is if that house was actually built from like with a special metal that we knew that could like shift or change its form kind of easily. So when the person channels the shifting of the house, the magic, it's going to coordinate with the magic effect a lot better, and it can be used multiple times. It just means they're genuinely designed by alchemists or wizards, and they're very fluid in their design. So like if it's a fire regent, it might be a very fire resistant metal that we know can deal with really hot temperatures. In the case of Galio, we have his fabrication glove, which was designed from the same metal as Leo's fabrication blade, which just meant it's a metal that's open to being changed. And then there's Mew's fire dual agates that is just very much meant to be able to absorb fire as we need it, and we can use it multiple times without any kind of repercussions. Next slide. Next is high grade regents. High grade regents is where we kind of get into the mud a little bit. So high grade regents, before we kind of jump into it, this is a result of us building the magical system kind of backwards. When we designed Aouria back in the day in Chapter 1, the rules of magic were very, very undefined. It was pretty much you were born with a magic type, you can use your magic type. That was the only real rule. As the story developed, we realized that we needed to kind of figure out how things work better, specifically in regards to Relton, because essentially Relton had taken on this role of teaching and becoming this like mentor to Kaleo and like the other Sonia and Kaya and teaching them how to use magic, but we had nothing for him to teach because there was no rules. So this is where we started putting all these things into effects, and some of it just worked out well. Other things like Leto, Kaleo, Relton all had very different ways they use their magic, so we needed to kind of find ways to make it all make sense in the same universe. The high grade regents is one of our solutions to that. And this is when magic does things it shouldn't be able to do. So the idea is a high grade regent is a specialized regent that enhances the base magic properties. So it doesn't change it, but it lets you do things with it you could never do under normal circumstances. Examples are Relton's Tome, Elizabeth's Wand, Mew has a tongue ring, Millie's got her tea orb thingy that I can't remember the name of. Somebody help me out, please.
Nope, I can't remember what it is.
Nobody? Fantastic. I hope Gorilla never sees this. So anyways, the point is high grade regents are um, able to manipulate your base magic in a way that you never could before. So the examples I like to use is Relton can turn his light magic from being able to like create a solid barrier of light that can stop an attack, or he can use teleportation because it's faster than light movement. So it's all kind of still within the realm of or the theme of light, but it can do things that light naturally can't do. And it's because he's using his high grade regent to enhance his magic. High grade regents are very rare, and most of them were contained in Animarth until the events of Chapter 8 when the vault was broken. That unleashed the large collection into the wider world. There's no specific census for how many there are, but Animarth had about 250 in its collection when it was at peak volume, and it would gift them to students that graduated the program, and then the students, when they passed away, would essentially have to return them to be passed on to somebody else. We don't know the specific number, but they are incredibly rare and they're sought after. If you're a Fae and you want to become like a more of a strong magic practitioner, getting a high grade regent is like would be considered the high end goal for you. However, high grade regents aren't just that simple. High grade regents have a couple conditions. One condition is they require bonding. So not anybody can use any high grade regent. They has to essentially be chosen by your regent and to be useful. Kaleo was chosen by his glove. When we had that destruction in Animarth and all the high grade regents escaped, the reason they escaped was because they all left to go seek their bonded partners. That's how Leto and Millie both ended up with high grade regents, even though they never should have under normal circumstances. They just were in the right place at the right time, and a regent that was compatible to them found their way to them. But if Leto and Millie decided to trade regents for any reason, they would both find them inert and unable to use them. We don't exactly know where high grade regents come from. That is by design. I'm a big believer in magic stops becoming magic when you explain every aspect of it. But the primary hypothesis that is led by artists at this time is that high grade regents are the result of mid grade regents being shared by multiple wizards over decades, generations, etc. So once a wizard, let's use Kaleo's fabrication glove, he uses it for like 10 years, and then someone else picks it up and they use it for 10 years, and then someone else picks it up and uses it for 10 years, and they each have a different base magic. That glove will remember the bits and pieces of all the various magics that's used. So when the fourth user picks it up, suddenly it can actually do things that it never could before, and it's evolved into a high grade regent, which now allows it to have all these extra abilities. So the main theory is it's mid grade regents that have memory of its past users, kind of sort of like built into its DNA, and it allows it to be allows the current user to manifest the magic in crazy ways. All right, moving on. Like any good rule, there are exceptions. The exceptions include human-borns. All humans have trace mana source and magic in their systems. However, the amount is too small to ever manifest normally. The only exceptions are the 1 in a million individuals born with enough mana to manifest it, like Siegfried Valor or Sonya Featherstone. So these are the humans who just happen to be born with enough mana that their actual source magic becomes apparent in their DNA, and they can wield it like a Fae could. Magic tech devices that tap into a human's natural mana pool to charge themselves. So things like Roka's chains, which essentially will um, like they essentially fuel themselves by pulling the mana out of the human user they're using. And then we have human magical practices like Sword List. This is a specialized martial art that actually learns how to harness human mana to strengthen the body for attack and defenses. So the reason why like Geo has been able to punch down walls or cut through boards or like do all the things like a sword can do, despite the fact he doesn't have a sword, is because he's actually been using mana to create like a coating around his fist or his hand to essentially give it all these extra effects. And it's kind of like a specialized martial art to bring out that very low mana in a way that's useful and effective. There's also magical mutations. There's only one known at this entire time in the story, and that is Elizabeth Ann Greensboro Smith. She has the ability to draw in mana from her surroundings. Right now, it's currently limited to living items such as bushes and trees, but there's speculation it could go beyond that to being able to actually like siphon life force from.
I hate to interrupt, Spence, but I gotta bounce.
All right, later, on.
Bye.
I'm enjoying the presentation, though. If you could have it or save it in some sort of form so I could look at it later, I'd appreciate it.
That's why we're recording.
A YouTube video.
All right, thank you. Have a good night. I'll be back later, guys.
Bye.
Just ruining the class. Anyway, so in this case, these are mutations. Elizabeth is the only known mutation currently on file. It doesn't mean there aren't others out there, but it's definitely very, 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 very rare. Another type of exception are the artificial celestials. As everyone knows, those beings with black blood can also wield magic. The thing is, they don't play by the same rules the Fae play by. They're not limited by the three-part principle, so their mana pools are essentially infinite. They don't really need the catalyst or the regent to use their spells. They can kind of just use their magic how they want. The only real limitation we know about them is there's just kind of a maximum output they can put out at any time. So they can't just like use their infinite pool in one giant tidal wave of attack. They can only physically output so much magic so quickly. We've never seen an artificial celestial run out of mana at this point, so it's unclear if they even can. And Damien, if you put a battery question in here, I will kill you. And the last magical exception is the 4 solstice regents. So the solstice regents are unique, and they're kind of a little bit of a late-minute addition into the lore. But the solstice regents are a special grade regent, and they're not high-grade regents, so they don't enhance the magical properties the way that we have talked to, like the high-grade regents do, allowing you to do like crazy elaborate spells. But what they do is they actually make the user they wield a damn lot stronger. So like if let's say their mana pool is 100, if they're holding a solstice regent, their mana pool is now 500 or 1000. It enhances everything they do. If their spell does 20 attack damage, their spell now does 70 attack damage. They just make you stronger, and they make your base form, your base magic way more effective. Anyone can wield a solstice regent. They're not bonded. So if, let's say, I'm going to pick on Nail for a quick second. If Nail gets his Solstice Regent stolen and then another Fae picks it up, they can use it just as well as they can. The Solstice Regents also shift based on their user. So they actually will change their physical form to suit the user who is currently using them. It's kind of like a psychic connection they have with their users. So for Maya, it's swords. For Ophelia, it's a helmet. But for like previous users, it was something completely else. These items are incredibly powerful and are like just high value in the Fae Kingdom. And next slide. Questions.
We have a lot of questions.
Perfect. Let's go into them.
So I'll start with the first one.
Let's do.
Elb asks, "Does the mana pool refresh?"
Yes. So that was in the placement. It was in the slide, but I kind of breezed past it. So mana pools can't do refresh over time. So essentially, they will either A, refresh naturally, which just means general rest, sleep, kind of classic mana pool stuff in most fiction. You cast 6 spells for the day. You take a break for a couple hours. Your mana pool might reset. There are also other ways to artificially refresh your mana pool. The 2 ways are through meditation. So like you can do things kind of like meditate, or it doesn't have to be like traditional meditation. Like Sonia can refresh hers through typing and writing. Millie can refresh
through
hers.
sunbathing.
Sunbathing, and her tea ceremony, I believe, also does one for her. So there are other ways to refresh them. But it really but it's all about finding inner peace. So
it's essentially on the lines of like long resting in D&D.
Yeah, it's either long resting in D&D or finding a way to force yourself to find inner peace. If you have a way to kind of force your body to do that, your mana will replenish a lot quicker. There's also a special liquid called mana sap. It was introduced in chapter 6. That's essentially a mana potion. If you drink it, your mana is just going to skyrocket right back up to the top. There is kind of secondary effects, like you'll feel like fatigue. Your body will kind of start having cold sweats. If you abuse it too much, you're going to have some obscure side effects, which is essentially like things like withdrawal and stuff. But if it's like a life or death situation, that's 100% better than dying. And there's lots. Mana sap can also be used by other species to do other things. Kotanai uses it to go feral, to go temporarily feral, and heighten her bestial abilities. But that's kind of we're getting a little bit of a side tangent then. Does that answer your question, Help?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thanks.
Beautiful. Next question.
Kitsu asks, "Can anyone just assign anything they want to be a grade regent, or does it have to be alchemically enhanced in order to be a low grade regent?"
Nope. Anything. It can be anything. Anything can be a low grade region. So like piece of plywood you pick up off a store, a stone you grab off the ground. Anything can be a low grade regent. There's no limitation on that. Just the like cheaper or weaker the item is, or the more incompatible that item is to your magic type, it's going to pretty much break it down immediately. So if like you use stone and you have water magic, that stone's probably going to crumble to dust and disappear after one spell. But yeah, anything can be used. That a few items can kind of be used 2 to 3 times if they're kind of like a close affinity is low grade, but that would be like high end low grade if that makes sense. Does that cover that question?
Kitsu put the doc thumbs up.
Perfect. Next
Okay.
question.
Sorry.
Okay.
Kitsu again asked, "What is the explanation for Relton's light magic being able to heal wounds?"
Twilight Healing. Essentially, it's a high grade region ability. He uses light. He casts light magic on a wound, and kind of like how a wound can kind of he can cauterize. It's that core concept being stretched very, very, very thin to translate to healing magic. Relton has probably one of the strongest high grade regions in the entire story because its roots is one of the few that can be traced, and it's traced all the way back to the original Light founder of Animarth. So that's kind of like his region is very top notch. And I said it does feel a teeny bit like cheating in the system, and I said that's a little bit of a result of how we developed the magic system after it was put into use. So we had to get a little creative in its use. But we do limit it to very light wounds, so like it can only heal like kind of surface level injuries. That's kind of how we balance that. Next question.
So Elb asks, I'm just kidding, it's Damian next. Can you disassemble multiple high grade regions and put them together?
Of course you would ask something I never considered. Just god damn it. Classic Damian. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say if you disassemble a high grade regent, they're gonna lose their ability, and if you fuse them together, at best case scenario, you're getting a mid grade regent. At worst case scenario, you're getting a low grade regent.
I would honestly agree with that. Um,
What?
and
Wait,
then
can I add on to that?
Sure.
So what if you had an object that fits together, can be fused together, and you had it as a mid-grade region, and then you went through the process with both halves of this object to
this is why people leave.
make each half a high-grade region, and then later on you brought the two high grades together.
So wait. So you
So an
have
object.
so the whole title cut. So I'm going to break this down in an example. So we have a locket, a necklace, and we break the necklace in half, and we use both halves as mid-grade regents. Then generations and generations later, they both turn into high-grade regents coincidentally, and then we bring those two high-grade regents back and we lock them together to form one object again.
Yes,
They would
sort
be
of.
two.
Basically.
They would be two high-grade regents still.
I see. So
You
it
would just have two
basically,
regents. Yeah.
despite them being together, they're still separate.
As to why, magic. We're not going to explain that
Gotcha.
because we want to leave some stuff up to mystery. Next question.
It's Damien again. What's rare, a mutation or a human using magic?
Right now, mutation, because we have two humans that can use magic and one mutated fae.
I don't
So
mean by writers, but by like actual in lore.
I'm still gonna go with mutation because that's what we have in canon.
Gotcha.
Okay. Elb asks. We were just talking about this last night. So, if a mid-tier regent evolved by being picked up by their owners and memorizing their magic, could you have a bunch of fae in a line with a mid-tier regent and force them to pick up the regent one by one while slaughtering them till the regents evolve into a high tier? Or do the regents have to be used for a certain amount of time to remember the magic? Or is it giga rare for anyone to be picked by a mid-tier regent at all?
Sorry.
So it's hilarious because we did talk about this last night. We because we talked about how people could try to game the system, and this is literally the how we talked about how people would game the system. So here's the answer: maybe. The answer is a maybe because we've expressed that regents the process from mid grade regent to a high grade regent is one, it's hypothetical. We don't it's something like the main scholar of regents in all of Aria in chapter 8, this is his theory. He can't prove it, but it's his theory of how they're made and where they come from. And if his theory is correct, you could in theory go like Galio use this for 6 months, then click. Leto use this for 6 months, click. Relton use this for 6 months, click. Oh, suddenly look, it's now a high grade regent. Could you in theory force it? Maybe. We don't know. There's no specific set limit to how many wizards it has to go through to become a high tier. It could be as low as 2, it could be as high as 14. So it makes it very hard to test and gain. If you have a character who is very sociopathic and very interested and they have the time to invest in a long experiment, yeah, maybe they could pull that off. And then just because there was a piece in here about a mid-tier regent being picked, a mid-tier regent doesn't bond as long as it's built to work for that person genuinely, so they can just use it. It doesn't. You don't have to. You only bond with high grade regents. Mid-tier regents anyone can really use. And most phase usually, even if they have a high grade regent, they might have a mid tier as a backup. Which I think Mew is a good example of that. So great question. Thanks for already breaking my system, and being like a step ahead of me. But yeah, so it's a maybe. As I said, we don't know the exact. There's no exact science to how to churn mid grade into high grade, and I never intend to create one because I said I want to leave some stuff up to the unknown. Next question. God, is Elb going to become the new Damien?
I welcome this.
I'm sorry, I'm digging through just to see. Okay. Thank you, Kitsu, for bolding your questions. Kitsu asks, can any human at any point in their life pick up being able to use their magic?
Such as Giovanni and Trine.
No. So genuine. I would say they would maybe if they are one of those 1 in a million, they might not realize they have their magic right away. It would definitely be something they would kind of probably stumble into. But if you don't have it, you don't have it. Swordless isn't isn't his magic manifesting. It's him learning how to use the very bare amount of mana in a very specific way.
Yeah, can any human just do that?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, anyone can learn Swordless.
Okay, yeah, that was the main question. Is
Oh,
like,
sorry,
if
sorry.
anyone can get their latent like magical abilities. So
It's
Yes.
generally through Swordless though.
Yeah.
Swordless
Yes.
is the kind of the only way right now. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Swordless is the only way we've talked about so far. There is kind of been like another small exception, like Artis was able to grant wishes to humans, but they're very small, weak wishes because he's tapped into their mana as well.
gotcha.
But yeah, so
Okay,
yeah, in theory, like someone like Anna could like learn Swordless or a Swordless equivalency to be able to use her mana, but I said it's still like all it would really do in a case of a human is it would supercharge whatever they already can do. So it would never manifest in a physical ability like fire or something. It would just make if like Anna shoots an arrow, she could shoot the arrow way harder.
Gotcha.
Next question.
You
Um,
skip
Blue has
past.
a follow up
you-
to mine.
Okay.
Dewey's gonna go back to 2 of them.
Yeah, I
Do,
realized it. Sorry.
Dewey's managing the questions. Let her do it.
So Rue asks, where does Mikage fit into all this?
So you're gonna like Mikage the Fae?
Yeah. Well, I assume the one that's connected with Rue.
Yeah.
Mikage the Fair,
like
Mikage the
originally.
Sword.
Yeah, that's why I more meant. So Mikage's weird. So Mikage is another one of those examples like Relton's Grimoire where we kind of work backwards. So Mikage is a Fae who essentially their magic was trying to
It's like
refresh my
soul binding.
pardon?
It's a little like soul binding, I would say.
Yeah, it's like their magic was essentially kind of like possession, soul finding. So in Mikage's attempt to um, live forever and kind of beat the Fey age thing, which is kind of a reoccurring theme for certain Fey villains, Graves has the same kind of beast, where they kind of want to. They are very upset by the fact they die so young. They kind of seek immortality. Mikage transferred his conscious with his magic into a sword, with the idea of whoever could pick up the sword they could eventually possess, and they could kind of live forever via their various sword wielders. Mikage then can enhance the person that's using the sword, which is where Rue gets their super speed from. And it's the one idea. It's kind of that same idea of swordless, where Rue can do super speed and and go really really quickly because Mikage's enhancing that actual normal human mana they have. Does that check out?
Sounds fine to me.
Perfect.
Okay,
Cool.
kind of like a jumper for a car or something.
Kind of, yeah, and that's a very specific scenario because that's a Fey that's essentially acting as like a conduit for Rue's mana because Rue can't use those abilities if Rue's not holding the sword.
Gotcha.
Look, Damien, a soul battery.
There you go.
There's things I could do that I won't be allowed to.
Okay, so then we have Damien's question and then Blue's question.
Oh, Blue's got a
So
question. Fantastic.
Damien asks, for high grade regions, I sort of thought that prior magic from added into one's own magic. Is that correct?
Kind of. So that's where the idea where those like extra spells come from. So like, I'm going to use the example of the healing, right? That Kitsu brought up. It was most likely whoever possessed Relton's Grimoire before him. One of those Fae, their primary magic was healing. So that's why he was able to then use a healing spell because a Fae with healing magic held it previously. So yeah, so that is kind of a factor. Once again, I don't really want to get too into the nitty gritty of how the specifics of how that works, but that is the core idea. Like, for example, I'm gonna use Millie's for example. Her high grade, there might have been someone in her high grade who had the ability to make people fall asleep with like a lullaby magic. So now she has a sleep poison. And it kind of manifests. And then the idea is if someone picks up their magic down the road, they might actually be able to use some magic aspects from Relton and Millie, whoever the next user is down the road. So in theory, the high grade regions would get stronger, even as they would continue to grow in power.
But one thing to add on to this, what I think you've told me before is you can never just use a prior user's magic outright. It always has to be mixed in with your own magic.
And that's where we talked about the idea of like Twilight healing. He shines a ray of light on the injury, and then the injury starts to heal. There's still that ray of light is the central catalyst. That's the light magic at the source. If he uses teleportation, he's moving at the speed of light. If it's a light barrier, he's creating like an energy field of light that has physical form. It's all still light based. So you can't just use outright healing magic. And that's where the writer creativity is supposed to kind of kick in. You're supposed to figure out how to blend those elements and make them work. That's where I'm trying to leave you guys wiggle room to create ideas and play with stuff. Like Muse got a great example too of like she has different color flames, and each different flame has different effects because it's all still fire magic, which is her base magic, but it's the effects of the fire change based on the previous users.
Well, it's the ability to change the color and temperature, so it would be past users being able to do one or the other.
Yeah, so like if there was like an ice user who used it before, she uses a blue cold flame, like that kind of idea.
Okay.
And
then
okay.
what?
Keep going.
Blue asks, so would that mean there's a significant number of swordless members who just don't unlock their latent mana?
Technically, all
Going back
swordless members have unlocked their latent mana. So this is kind of a more recent addition to the lore as well. This was something I was kind of kicking around. Me and Draken were kicking around the idea before Draken left, and I really, really, really liked the idea. And with Draken no longer being with us, I just decided to make it canon. Because Draken had his own different thing where he kind of wanted to build a completely new system, where I prefer this system because it's already playing into aspects we've established in the lore. So yeah, the idea is any swordless user can use this. Swordless is a very rare form. There's only a handful of them in the entire world, and it's partly because the Fae have actually the Fae. There are Fae who hunt down swordless users and kill them because they don't want the humans realizing that they have this special ability. That's something actually a plot beat I want to get into later down the story. So any swordless user, and then there's swordless users who use swordless, but they don't actually know that they're using mana. Geo has no idea how he does what he does. He just knows that he knows how to do it. He can't explain it. Same with Trine, for that matter. Or
Yeah,
Trine?
she
Gotcha.
Trine, whatever you want to Trine, whatever you want to call her.
Trine. So same idea for them. This is actually kind of a story beat I have in mind for a little bit later down the road that I want to explore. And yes, Leto is in danger. Yeah. So, but yeah, you're definitely like you're on the right track, Blue. Does that fully answer your question?
Wait, that actually brings up a really good follow-up question to that.
Follow-up question.
If a Fae learns to use swordless,
How
does that access their magic?
Somebody's a step ahead of me. Yes, I have thought about that, and I have an answer for that we are not going to reveal in this presentation. But there is an answer.
Okay.
I have already.
Oh,
I
love this.
Yes. There is a plan specifically for that scenario.
I like that Damien is like, I didn't think of this question.
I have thought of this question. I've literally asked both of you about this.
And I'm sure as you're probably
job,
thinking,
Casey.
Volt Leto might actually have some enhanced abilities that he doesn't even realize he has. Given he has a much larger mana pool,
This is exciting. Yeah,
a much larger mana pool than any human does, being a half Fae. So yes, there might be. I might be planning some stuff there. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. All right, I think on that note, we're going to move on.
Are we breaking here?
Oh yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break, guys. Go use the bathroom. I'm gonna grab some more water, and then we'll get into the second half of the presentation. And I'm gonna pause the recording. All right, so getting back into it. Now we're going to talk a bit about the actual governing structure of the Fae Kingdom and what the Fae Kingdom looks like as a whole. So the Fae Kingdom is kind of a unique governing structure, as we referenced in the initial lore. Faes aren't the super biggest people on like bureaucracy and government and supply lines and all this jazz. They kind of just are very free spirited. But as civilizations grow, some form of government is essentially necessary for a civilization to thrive past a certain point. The Fae Kingdom is essentially, in the court systems, is their answer to try to be that in the middle. So the Fae Kingdom is 50% a governing body, and it's 50% a military alliance. The shape and the layout of the Fae Kingdom varies from regime to regime, but always has the same base structure. The court has a queen. The court that has the current queen belongs at the very top. Below her, you have her loyalist courts. These are courts that kind of serve as lieutenants, court officials, governors, and it's their job to kind of be the middleman. Then you have the minor courts. These are courts that are essentially like the lowest tier. For whatever reason, they don't have any kind of seat in government, and they're just genuinely have to answer to a loyalist court, and that loyalist court answers to the Fey Queen court. And then below them, you have courtless Fey. They're not really part of the Fey Kingdom in any official capacity. They don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to do anything, but they get no rights either. But it's considered to be better in a minor court than to be courtless. And this is just kind of what the rough structure will look like. As I said, the amount of loyalist courts, the amount of neutral courts, the amount of that can all change from regime to regime depending on how things play out. So yeah, that's how that looks. So, back in the year 25 of the Order era, a growing sense of worry and distraught have appeared across many independent Fey courts of Aouria. Both human sky nations, the Terminus Federation, and the Tian Kong Empire have standing armies that could easily overwhelm any single court. Additionally, stories brought back from the First Heavens War by the Blackfire mercenaries have informed them just how ferocious the Sayadara soldiers are and the overwhelming power of the Heian airships. So, in the name of preserving their lifestyle, territory, race, 14 Fey courts have joined together to form the Fey Kingdom. At current, this is more of a mutual defense pact and not a single nation. Additionally, the role of the Fey Queen is just an honorary title used as a neutral judge to settle any inter-alliance disputes. The true authority of the Queen can only be enacted in a case of an emergency that one of the 14 courts finds itself in conflict with a foreign power. In which case, she assumes the role of an authoritarian leader, so there is no debate or infighting among the allied courts during wartime. Additionally, an arrangement is agreed upon that the role of the Fey Queen in the governing court will rotate every 10 years between the 14 islands. So once you've given up the role, your court won't see it again for over a century. Once the Fey Kingdom firmly announces itself to the wider world, the first Fey Queen is appointed. This is Queen Iliania, and is chosen as the chosen monarch of the Sky Island of Kanya. The Court of Prism is the first to hold the mantle of leadership. So this event took place about 350 years ago from the present date. This is how the Fey Kingdom got started. There's a bit more context here if you read the historical timeline that can kind of tell you why the Fey are worried about the Terminus Federation, the Tian Kong Empire. For the sake of this presentation, we're not going to go into that because it's a rabbit hole in and of itself. But pretty much humans grew more and more powerful. The Fey Kingdom were building a more formal government as a response to human power going on. There are other notable events from history that most Fae would be kind of aware of in their upbringing. Those notable events are, next slide. In year 42, the Fae Kingdom declares war on the Tian Kong Empire and joins what's known as the Second Heaven War as the third power in the fight. This is led by the Court of Flowers, who is the current court in charge, and Queen Mab. Queen Mab essentially does this to maintain her role as the Fae Queen. Her term was about to expire, so she enacts the emergency actions, comes up with an excuse to go to war, and they join the war, which lets her hold on to her mantle as Fae Queen. Another year passes in the war. Essentially, as things go really, really poorly for the Tian Kong Empire, they actually agreed to an alliance with the Terminus Federation, their long-term rivals, and the two human nations team up to fight the Fey Kingdom in now a 1v1. 3 more years pass as we get to year 46 of the Order era. The Fae are losing. They're just going to lose. They're outnumbered. They're outgunned. They never actually thought they would have to fight both human nations at the same time, so they're forced into a treaty. This treaty is known as the Sky Accords. However, Mab is essentially still kind of trying to warmonger and hold on to her power. Everyone kind of sees through it, and the Court of Flowers is essentially exiled from the Fey Kingdom going forward because they just can't be trusted to honor the original purpose of the agreement, which is supposed to be about self-defense, not about waging war. Then we have a good peace for about 50 some odd years until we get to the year 102. In 102, the Fey Queen Ariana of the Court of the Sun, it's her turn. She finished collecting the 4 solstice regions. This is the first time the solstice regions appear in the historical timeline. And then in an act of sharing power, she gives them to the 4 most loyal courts. This is where the order of the solstice knights begin. There's one for each season. With the Fey Knights or leaders, they're given to Fey Knights or leaders of already impressive skill. Then they govern these regions to turn them into powerhouses that could lead the Fey Kingdom armies if another conflict arises. Coincidentally, another conflict arrives 2 years later. In the Third Heavens War, also known as the Battle of Amona. The Third Heavens War is just essentially the Heavens Federation versus the Fey Kingdom. This one is about 200 years ago. No, 270 years ago, actually. Um, and it all takes place on a single island. And essentially, this island had both a human population and a Fey population living on it. They couldn't come to terms, but because it had two different populations living on Amona, the human population went to the Federation saying, "Hey, can you help us kick the Fey off?" And the Fey population went to the Fey Kingdom, which at this point had recruited more courts to their ceasefire alliance. It was like, "Hey, can we join you so you can protect us?" Things just escalated from there, and the entire Third Heavens War takes place exclusively on this island. It results in this just massive devastation of these two superpowers fighting in this very contained space. You have like Heians bombarding island Fey Knights. You have the Solstice Knights shooting down Heians. It's a giant war. Essentially, everyone kind of realizes what are we even fighting for at this point. It goes on for 2 years. Um, Amona as an island is essentially wrecked. It's unlivable as a result of all this constant conflict. And the people who survived, what few of them, they're escorted to different islands. Amona's turned into a ceasefire location, and it essentially still serves today as like the ultimate neutral ground for people to meet. Um, and there, the Sky Accords were signed again, and they were updated to kind of be a little more like specific to the avoiding Fey versus human relations. And they've actually held since then. So for the last 275 years, we've not seen a war because the Sky Accords from Amona have done their job. That's kind of how like horrible this war was. It created 2 centuries of peace afterwards. So this is the current lookout of what the current situation looks like in the Fey Kingdom. So as we showed earlier, was this kind of the base example. This is every established court in the story thus far on here. There's still obviously terms in here where you'll see neutral or defeat a court. This is where there's just room to add other courts. There's also more minor courts than what we see up here. There's, I want to say like 25 or some crap like that. I can't remember the specific number. No, 17? 17, 19. I really should know this. Of how many there actually are, I can't remember off the top of my head. But however, the Loyalist Courts and the Court of Flowers, those numbers are 100% accurate. There is the Court of Flowers that sits on the top. Oh, I forgot to bring this back up. In the Third Heavens War, that we were just talking about. Can you go back a slide? Thank you. Things got so dire for the Fey Kingdom, they brought the Court of Flowers back into the war. So they let the Court of Flowers rejoin the Fey Kingdom because the Court of Flowers has a military unit called the Perennial Knights, and the Perennial Knights are just really, really powerful. And they're kind of like the best trained Fey soldiers in the world. So they're like, hey, like we need your help if we're gonna win this thing. And essentially, the Perennial Knights helped them make it a draw. But yeah, so the Court of Flowers, after 50 years, was allowed back into the alliance. As time, and then yeah, we get to the current one. So this is about 275 years later. The history of the Fey Kingdom has become more solidified and dignified over those last 275 years, a bit more formalized. A little bit of bureaucracy has slipped in their way in there, just because that's how progression of time works. And instead of just rotating every 10 years like the previous plan, now it's all based on succession wars. So when one queen dies, any other courts that want to vie for power get to vie for power. Sometimes the succession war, and we'll go more into what succession wars look like in the other presentation. But the result of whatever, how peaceful or how dangerous that was, that determines who the next one was. The most recent succession war from 14 years ago saw the Court of Flowers oust the Court of Creation and take over power. So the Court of Flowers and Titania's ruling. The 6 courts that backed her up in the war, or like presented loyalty to her during the war, was the Court of the Eclipse, Court of Court of Frost, Court of Dunes, Court of Stars, Court of the Southern Sky, and one unknown court which we will be giving a name to soon. And that's the court that belongs to the Spring Knight. We've never built the Spring Knight character yet. Everyone say hi to Elb.
Hi, Elb.
Hi, Elb.
Hi, everyone.
Elb will
Hello,
be taking
Elb.
over the mantle of the Spring Knight in the next chapter, so wish him luck. He'll be getting to decide things like what does that court look like and like all this other jazz. It is a little bit of a weird one because they do exist in the lore and we know they exist because of just how we've set up things, but we don't have any details yet. So that will eventually be filled out with the court of whatever, and that's where the Spring Mantle is held. We've also have some of the smaller courts we've talked about over the course of the story. We have the Court of Phases, the Court of Kelp, the Court of Blackfire, the Court of Altitude, the Court of Ruin. These are just kind of like Court of Altitude. These are all just kind of more like lesser courts that don't really want to be interested in immediate politics, but they still want to fall under the Fey Kingdom umbrella, so they're kind of just there. And yeah, this is kind of the current lookout. You'll notice some courts aren't on here, the extinct courts, because during the previous succession war, anyone who stood against Titania was essentially genocided. So those are courts of creation, court of tides, court of the undying, court of the prism, which was the first queen court, so that was fun, and court of something I can't remember. Oh, the court of the northern sky, the southern sky rival. Those four courts had back creation. They were all wiped out. There was also a seventh court that did back flowers back in the Succession War, the Court of the Sun. They were driven extinct during the events of the Succession War. And then Titania did not help them rebuild because she was very mad at them. And that's a story we'll save for another day. So, Court of Flowers, just talking about these guys. The Court of Flowers is, we'll be dividing a bit more into them in the actual chapter, but this is to give everyone a bit of a base idea of what to expect. They live on Pterodon. This is a huge sky island. It's a entire biome is what's called deciduous forest. Did I pronounce that right, Mike?
Yep, deciduous.
Thank you. And it's just a very rich island. It's got like it's like resource self-sufficient. It's like beautiful. It has the seasons. It's just a very ideal island. It's where the Court of Flowers live. The current monarch is Queen Titania, a figure known for her raw pragmatism and her desire to eliminate any perceived threats against her reign. Her expansionist principles are well known since her reign started. Titania is quite unpopular with many of the subjects, from the minor courts and even some of her own loyalist courts. Despite all the negative sentiment, no one dares challenge her rule, as she is so powerful that they fear a challenge will end in suffering or more than a simple exile from a kingdom. The culture of the Court of Flowers is actually not a pretty culture, despite their name. They're very militaristic. They have been for hundreds of years. The court is primarily made up of dryad and nymph phase, so like lilies, flowers, plant phase. Any race that's born to the Court of Flowers that doesn't fall into one of those sub races is shunned, and often they voluntarily choose to leave the island and disown themselves from the court because they're like very purist. The island believes in power, influence, and their own status. Most citizens still harbor that 300-year-old grudge where Mab got them booted from the Second Seventh War, and they feel that she was mistreated. Within the court, there's the Perennial Knights. We've talked about them a little bit. They are the Court of Flowers, Pride and Joy, excluding the royal family naturally. This is the name given to their military. These soldiers are trained in both non-magic and magic combat alike. They wear the best armor, they have the best weapons, they are elite fighters, and they are many high-ranking officers of them even carry their own high-grade regions. In recent years, they've also been further developed with a large reserve of mana sap, so that mana sap for Mortis and Sala has found its way into Titania's throne room due to events from that chapter. And so these powerhouses soldiers also essentially have free recharge kits. They are very dangerous face soldiers. And Meg said she was going to take over this one to give me a small break so I could catch my breath.
So going on to the royal family, we have Queen Titania. She is the ruler and monarch. Titania is the living embodiment of her court. She's superior, obsessed with perfection, vengeful, and she has limitless ambition. If it was her choosing, she would see the Fae King rise to new heights, even if it is over a mountain of corpse. As you have probably seen, the one line she has with is actually in the Ophelia post. It is quite terrifying. So if you don't know where it is, go back and read it somewhere. I think it's like one of my first posts with Ophelia. That being said, she does love her people in a very way, and does intend for one of her daughters to continue her dynasty, which going into her daughters, she has 3 of them. So she has the first princess, which is a high general of the Perennial Knights. So the first princess actually fought in the Succession War as a mid-ranking knight, just because it was against the Court of Creation 14 years prior. The second princess is actually Elo's character, Celestris, or Yen, that we saw back in chapter 6. What?
That was the dogs.
Oh. She is the black sheep of the family, mainly because she left her court to fall in love with a Heavens Federation, which is like a huge enemy for the Fae, obviously, which is Geo. Before that, she served as a member of the Palace Guard and assisted in taking down the Court of Prism during the Succession Wars. So during that time, she was a Palace Guard, took down uh, and help take down Court of Prism. I hope that made sense. And then, right as I'm trying to figure out how to word this, Celestris was probably still kind of is considered to be the favorite of Titania. But right now, because of the romance with Geo and everything that took place in chapter 6, she is a prisoner in her own home, locked away in the palace and forbidden from leaving Pterodon. And then we have our third princess, which is basically she works as a diplomat and a politician. Her whole, she did not help with the Heavens, or not Heavens Wars, sorry, the Succession Wars, mainly because she was too young. So now what she does is she helps her mother with both domestic and foreign affairs.
Nailed it. The first and second princesses will be played by people down the road. They know who they are. I'm not going to reveal that just quite yet for the sake of funness, but that's kind of why their profiles are a little more vague, because we're going to leave room for them to grow into them. And yeah, and then this is the Loyalist courts. These are the 6 ones that are really relevant to the story thus far. We have the Court of Frost. This is the home island is Borealis. It's a very tundra-based climate. We saw these in Leto's Memory Dive in Chapter 8. They are the current holders of the Winter Mantle, and we met the character Nail Vasoon in Chapter 8 as well. He's the eldest son of the ruling House of Soon, or Soon. San? Well, how do you pronounce that?
Soon.
Soon.
Sune is how I pronounce it.
Sune? Okay. The Royal House of Sune, who is the Winter Knight. Their military force is commonly called the Frost Guard. Next up, we have the Court of Stars, hailing from the island of Nepho. This court is made up of the Zeldoran Fae. Zeldoran is a Fae subtype that's completely unique to Aouria. Elo made them up for this specific story. They have been actually relevant in the last 2 regimes. They first were a Loyalist Court of Creation, and then they were a Loyalist Court of Flowers. They work undercover. Their treachery. They kind of work with undercover, spy work, treachery. That's kind of their whole thing. They actually betray. Lady Fulu is their leader. She betrayed the Court of Creation, swapped sides with the Court of Flowers, and was a big reason why Creation lost that war. They have a special, small but elite military unit known as the Pahelian. I don't know how Ela pronounces this. She's gonna yell at me later. The Pahelian. Next. Next is the Court of Dunes. Next is the Court of Dunes. They hail from the desert island of Atla. The Court of Dunes, unlike the Frost or Stars, they're not really kind of biased to their subraces. They'll let pretty much anybody join. They're cool like that. The only real closest thing they have to any consistency in their subraces is the Lilin Fae family, we're called the Laval family, which has ruled the court for 7 generations, the most recent being Ophelia, who is the current leader and the wielder of the Autumnite Mantle. They are traders and animal tamers first and foremost. They find their influence in wealth and resource management. They don't have a standing military. Almost all trained sky whales in Aouria can have their roots traced back to a Court of Dunes breeder. Next up is the Unknown Court. This is the court that El will be taking over. What has been established about them is they played a major role in the Succession War, including events like the Siege of Khania and the blockade of Isidelia. And then their biggest triumph was a skirmish with General Adarath Astoria, where the court leader of the time slew Adarath in single combat. Adarath did not die. We know that he actually survived and went into hiding under an alias in Chapter 6, but for the intents and purposes, he was considered dead. And then we have the 2 other courts that don't have Solstice regents but are loyal to Titania. The Court of the Eclipse. This is a court of Oni-style Fae. who did not have an island to themselves. They were official court, but they didn't have an island. They joined Titania during the Succession War, as she promised to give them an island. When the war concluded, she considered that. She gave them the island of Zuwawumin to settle. Prior to that, they lived in the court. They lived with the court of the Southern Sky, and they still remain as close allies to the Southern Sky, often intermarrying between them. This is why Kurohoko and Asuna were cousins, despite the fact they were from completely two different courts. And Asuna was from the court of the Southern Sky. This is a court of Red Onife, led by House Tenkaichi. They were famous for their long-time rivalry with the Blue Onife from the court of the Northern Sky. This was a multi-generational feud, which climaxed in the previous Succession War as the Northern Sky sided with Creation. The Southern Sky was finally able to defeat the rivals in exchange for bending the knee to Titania. So they currently serve as wardens of the Phoenix Gate and several sea islands surrounding it. They still remain in good relationships with their allies, especially the Court of Eclipse. So Eclipse and Southern Sky, while not loyalist courts, are kind of still there, but they are kind of a little bit more on the outs compared to the other four. That's why they're kind of like they're loyalist courts, but they're also not as good because they didn't get mantles. And that is the current structure. Question time.
We don't really have a lot of questions.
Woo!
But we
That means they did a good job, or a very bad job.
So Damien, of course, is the one that has the question first. Can a new court be created? If so, how? And can an extinct court be revived?
So can a new court created? Yes, 100%. New courts can be created all the time. Pretty much as long as you get enough people together, they can go, hey, we want to be our own court. We're a court. They might not necessarily have an island. This is kind of how like things like the Court of the Eclipse actually got started, was because they're like a subsect of the Court of the Southern Sky, and they wanted to be their own thing. Probably because none of them had red skin. So yeah, new courts can be created all the time. Extinct courts could, in theory, be revived. It depends on what that court considers important. Like a court of, let's use Creation, for example. If they wanted to revive themselves in return, they might have to. If they still want to like be exclusively pixie phase with creation magic, they might really struggle to do that because there's just not enough of them left alive to build up a court. They don't have an island. They don't have resources. But in theory, if someone could rally them and they would be willing to kind of like expand what qualifies as being a court of creation member to include non-pixie fae, they could in theory come on back just fine.
All right.
So that goes into the next question that Damien has. How are relations between courts like Court of Kelp and Court of Altitude? And add the follow-up question after. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just sort of bringing up like, does owning an island affect position in standing compared to other courts and everything?
Yeah. If you have an island all to yourself, if your court owns an island, especially a sky island, yeah, you're considered a lot more powerful. But even like the court of Tide, which was now extinct, they only owned a sea island, but they were a very inclusive court. They even had humans and bestials in their court. They had like a massive island, and they were like one of the largest courts of them all, despite the fact they were very unorthodox. But yeah, so like the relationships between the minor courts, it's kind of that's not really defined. It's kind of really up to their owners. So if we want to talk about altitude and kelp, that would be a conversation between Elo and Dewey, because Dewey's altitude because she played
Audrey.
Thank you so much. And kelp was Mervin's court.
So to basically tie it up, a court's main goal generally when trying to gain political power is real estate and numbers.
Real estate, numbers, and then to climb the hierarchy. So, like, if you want to gain power, you want to. The next time a succession war comes in, you want to bid to win the succession war and go, hey, we've got a daughter here who I think is going to be a great Fae Queen candidate. We want to be the next monarch, and then who will support us? And then if enough people do, and then they go to war, and they win, the people who support the courts that supported them become their loyalists, then they get to take over. And having numbers and power to do those things helps. If you're a very weak, small court and you want to be the Fae Queen, you better have something going for you because you're not going to win otherwise. Then, because a more powerful court's going to take over, or outbid you essentially. But yeah, but lots of there's also courts like I'm going to pick on Court of Altitude. they just don't care. They're just like, we want to do science and shit. We want to do science and magic and study the stars, and we don't want to do politics. We want the protection that comes to being the Fan Kingdom because we don't want to be invaded. But so we'll do the bare minimum, but we got no interest in politics whatsoever.
I see. All right.
So it really depends on the court. And there's kind of like it's not really like said, but there's kind of a history that very certain courts are much more geared towards the queenship than others. Like Flowers has had it twice in the history. Prism had it multiple times because they were the first ones. Sun was had it in the past, and that was like also a very powerful court till they went away. It's implied. I think actually me and Elo talked about it. Creation might have actually had it 2 generations in a row because when his mom took over, they literally they're like, okay, she's dead. Succession wartime. Does anyone challenge us? Nope. Everyone loves the mom, Killer's mom, whose name I'm drawing a blank on right now. And the worst.
Wow.
And she just took into power. So like succession wars can also just be very like. There's also a history. Some succession wars are just literally one-on-one duels. Like it's like, I want to be the next queen. Well, I want to be the next queen. You two fight it out, and whoever wins gets to be the next queen. And that's the war ends with that single duel. Sometimes they're like major internal conflicts, like civil wars.
Isn't Kaleo's mom Asmerelli?
Yeah, Esmeralda. Yep, you're right. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Any other questions?
No. That's it.
Is that the entire presentation?
That was it.
Yep.
Nice.
All right. Let's go start
Well
recording.
done.
Thank you for
Oh, I
listening.
expected a part 3.
So yeah. So to be honest, that one went a little quicker than I thought it would, but we're still at a good hour and 10 minutes. So I think it's a good spot.